Hi there, Haley here from the Apollo team. In this training, I want to talk to you about what properties are and how you can create them in Apollo. For any organization, you can see the entire list of properties that you've created by navigating to the Properties section. On this screen, you'll see all the properties associated with your organization. Each property essentially is a single analytics implementation that may apply to one or many websites or applications. For the case of Adobe implementations, one Apollo property corresponds to one data collection property. If you'd like to create a new property, you can do so from the screen by selecting Add New Property. If for some reason this feature isn't available to you, it simply means that your user permissions do not allow you to create properties, and you should reach out to your organization or agency administrator. I'm going to click Add New Property now. I'm first instructed to provide a property name. Next, I pick the implementation type. At this time, there are two implementation types for me to choose from. The first one is a legacy implementation where I send data directly to Adobe Analytics, or I can choose the modern implementation where XDM is sent to the Adobe Edge. For now, I'm going to stick with legacy and select Next. A modal appears asking me if I'd like to accept the charges associated with property creation. If the answer is yes, I'm going to click Continue. My property has now officially been created. You can see it over here on the left, but I can choose now or later to complete all of my property setting details. One of these details is the data layer object name. By default, it's going to be app event data, but you can choose to change this out with whatever value of your choosing. Next, I can provide the information where data layer documentation can be sent to. You can see that I already have a connected GitHub account because I've already created properties before within this organization. But if I wanted to add a new GitHub connection, I could select Connect to GitHub. This may ask me to provide a username and a password, but this is where you set up the API connection to GitHub. Next, I can provide a GitHub repository name where data layer documentation can be sent to. So this should be a repository that you've already created before. So for example, I'll navigate over to the GitHub application and you'll see I've created this repository specifically for my Apollo docs. And you can also see I put it within the Search Discovery organization. It may be that you put the Apollo docs in your own personal GitHub account and not a GitHub organization. And that's totally fine. We can support you either way. So if this was just in my own repository, then that'd be fine. But since I put it within an organization's GitHub, I'm going to go ahead and select a GitHub organization. And the organizations that will appear in this dropdown are any organization your GitHub user has access to. So I only have access to the Search Discovery GitHub organization, so that's the one I'm going to move forward with, and I'm going to select Next. The third step is where I can add the Adobe API credentials. If this is not an Adobe implementation, then this is the step where you add the credentials for any reporting platform that you're using. You can see that we provide video instructions for how to set up the Adobe API connections appropriately, so we're not going to walk through that in this training, but you're welcome to watch that video. I will, however, copy over the details for my Adobe API connections here. I'll start by adding a connection name. Next, the client ID. So if I navigate over to console.adobe.io where my credentials are, I can copy them from here. Following with the organization ID. And the last item here is the private key. So if you're not sure where your private key is, you can navigate to the bottom of your project details here under credentials, and you'll see here where you can select generate a public private key pair. This will download a file on your machine where you can view the private key details. I happen to have them open over here, and I'm going to copy the entire contents, including the begin private key and end private key prefix and suffix. The form validation is telling me everything looks good, but when I select test, this is going to tell me if the credential information I've provided is acceptable according to Apollo. So it says it was successfully connected, which is a good sign. The next step is I'm going to add the remaining reporting platform configurations that are required. So these include the tracking server, and in Adobe implementations, these are the non-secure and secure C-named tracking servers where data is to be sent. If you're not sure what these values should be, you can always reach out to your technical team and they can help you out. For my business, this is my tracking server, and this is my secure tracking server. The final step is to associate a report suite with my different Apollo environments. So later you'll see that for any given property, you can make deployments to different environments. And for the case where you're deploying to a data destination, Apollo needs to know what that data destination should be. And my production report suite, here, I can add those now. I don't have a development report suite, so I'm going to choose to omit that. But if you also have a development report suite, you can add that here. And now I'm going to click finish. All right, so it's opened my brand new property now. But at any point, I can go back and edit the details that I just showed you. There are two ways to do so. So the first way is if I navigate back out to my properties list, you can see my new Haley Corp property listed here. And if I select this little edit icon here, it pulls up all of my property details, and you can expand them to view them or edit them and save changes. The second way I can edit my property settings is using the gear icon up in the global nav. So if I select this gear icon, again, this modal pops up. I want to make one note that if you have multiple people on your team who are going to be adding elements to the Apollo implementation or doing deployments, then each person on your team needs to add their own API connections to the platform so you know at any given time who's doing deployments where. So those details they should add themselves would be the GitHub connection. So any other user isn't going to be able to see my GitHub represented here. They'll only be able to see a GitHub of their own. So you should instruct them to add their own GitHub connection now by clicking the gear icon and coming to property details. You should also instruct them to add their own Adobe I/O connection or other reporting platform connection. And so you can see they have the option to add an Adobe Analytics connection here. They won't be able to see my Adobe I/O connection here. So those are the two things that any other persons doing deployments on your team should come into property settings after you've created the property and perform. Thank you for watching this training on properties in Apollo. If you'd like to learn more about Apollo properties, you can always visit our Apollo docs, which are located via the help section on our site, and walk through all the features of an Apollo implementation in more depth. We look forward to seeing you in the next training.